Very good evening. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and today we want to begin the show with a very, very important statistic. The unemployment rate among graduates aged 20 to 24 in urban India in 2019 was over 60% as per the latest data from CMIE. The slowdown has made finding jobs extremely difficult for this category of people straight out of college. The numbers do improve in the age bracket of above 30. Overall, the unemployment rate is at about 7.5%, which doesn't sound too bad, but it is the granular data that hides the real truth. Remember, unemployment is something which has been a huge issue in the run-up to the last general election. No one is really talking about it right now in the middle of an economic slowdown, but it is one aspect of the slowdown that cannot be ignored. When there is an economic slowdown, there will be fewer jobs, which of course will lead to lesser spends and lesser incomes. We're going to talk about the consumption hit that the Indian economy has taken ahead on the show. But for now, I'm joined by Mahesh Vyas, MD and CEO of CMIE, who's put out this data to understand it better. Welcome, Mr. Vyas, to the show. Thank you for joining us. And I was going through your latest wave. We know CMIE does periodic surveys on unemployment. And one figure which struck me was that of unemployed graduates in urban areas, and that rate being above 60%. Can you explain that?
Yes, it is a very stark number. It is, it's a very high number, and this is the number that we should worry most about. This number has been rising over the several waves that we have been conducting the survey on, and 2019 saw this number rise all the way up to 60%. So I think what happens is that most people see an unemployment rate like 7.5% and pass on, saying that this is not a big deal, 7.5% is okay, it's understandable. But the stress is really in the young graduates who are hitting the labor market and not finding a job. So 60% is really the number we should worry about, and there are other numbers which we should worry about also. Because this 60% is the unemployment rate that very young graduates face. So this is 20 to 24 years of age, and when you have just graduated, you're looking for a job and you're not getting a job as yet. But you know, it's okay if you take a year or two to find a job. That's not exactly fine, because people should be getting jobs as soon as they step out of campuses. But the problem is that even if they wait till their late 20s, the unemployment rate is 23% for graduates.
Yeah.
I think even that 23% is unacceptably high. So we really need to worry about these numbers and take our focus away from the 7.5% we're talking about.
So just to give context, 7.5% is the overall number that has been put out, and you're saying is giving people the sense that it is not such a big issue, isn't it?
That's right. And people seem to believe 7.5% is not a big deal, and this number isn't growing much. So this is not double digit, and therefore this is okay and we can pass on. That's not actually the right way of looking at this. If you look at the new people coming into the labor market, if you look at the educated people, graduates, then the unemployment rate is really very high, and we should shift our focus to looking at the right kind of employment that we should be having, which should be urban. The urban unemployment rate is 9%. And it's the rural areas which has got a very low unemployment rate, because people work there independent of what kind of jobs they get. So I think you're right, the focus needs to move to the younger, educated people who are facing a very high unemployment rate right now.
Explain to me about the rural unemployment rates, which, as you mentioned, is lower. But why do you say that that's no relief?
So what happens is that we have seen this in the earlier waves that we have conducted the survey on as well, that people move from villages to urban places in hunt for jobs, and they usually get these jobs in construction sites and partly in manufacturing and a little bit in services as well. But that's the pecking order. It's essentially construction sites, and then it goes to manufacturing, and then it goes to services. Now, if they don't find these jobs, then A, the migration stops, B, and when things get really bad, and that's what's been going on right now, they go back to the villages. When they go back to the villages, then you ask them over there, are you doing some work? Are you working? They say, yes, we are working on the farms. If the farm is like a huge black hole that can absorb any number of people doing minimal or next to negligible work. All these people, by classification, get classified as employed. So they don't produce any extra produce, but they are all engaged in a vast farm that can take on more people to clean up some things here and there. So this is really disguised employment, and that because the rural sector, the villages have 66% weightage, they have a big impact on the overall unemployment rate in the country. And that's what's bringing this rate down to 7.5%, because rural India is 6.8 and urban India is 9%.
So let's focus on unemployment in educated urban youth. Is it a reflection of the economic slowdown?
It is a reflection of the slowdown. We have seen the investment ratio slide down almost persistently from 2011-12. So that's nearly a decade of reduction in the investment rate. And we are seeing no investment proposals being made by the private sector. There's not much push from the government as well. So if you don't have investments for such a long time, then obviously there are no new jobs being created. So the educated people, the graduates who are stepping out, don't find jobs to absorb them.
Now, Mr. Vyas, we spoke last before the budget. Today we're speaking again in the run-up to the budget. In your view, has the government done enough so far on unemployment, and what can they really do at this point?
Well, the government is increasingly losing its leverage on the economy. It has let the economy slide down for far too long, and as it lets this go further and further, the probability of or the efficacy of its interventions reduce. So today, if the government actually says, I want to go ahead and do something, it will take several quarters, not just a couple of quarters, but many more than that, for them to actually have any impact. So we are losing too much time. So what's important is for the government to go out and spend money in a fashion that puts money in the hands of consumers, that can raise domestic demand, that can lead to some investments. This itself will take maybe more than a year, year and a half to have an impact. We need to realize that the government today has got no magic bullets left in its bag to actually have an impact next quarter. So it needs to take serious note of this, that the situation has really gone quite far in the slowdown, and we require some immediate steps and some medium-term steps to ensure that demand comes up and investments comes back thereafter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vyas, for speaking with us. Mahesh Vyas of CMIE, talking about the data that they've put out, which shows when you go into it in detail, startling, numbers about unemployment in urban areas among educated people, among graduates. To talk more on this, I'm joined now by Rituparna Chakravarti, Executive Vice President and co-founder of Team Leads. I'm also joined by Abhi Ghosh, former IS officer and ILO official. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for speaking with us today. Let me go across to Abhi Ghosh first. Mr. Ghosh, now I know this is CMIE data, and it shows trends of unemployment spiking among urban youth. Now, you could argue that 20 to 24 is not necessarily the right slice because people are choosing to study further over graduation as well, and not necessarily looking for jobs. Do you see a correlation between these unemployment rates and the slowdown?
Well, yes, there is definitely a correlation between recession, as you call it, or slowdown, and the unemployment rate. That is something that happens everywhere. Well, I don't know whether these figures that CMI has brought out is somewhat staggering, because if you look at their earlier report of 2017-18, it had said that the unemployment rate among graduates was something like 13.2%. So to think that from there in a year or a year and a half it has gone to 60% is really quite a quantum jump, which I do not want to quarrel at this stage with figures. But be that as it may, the fact is that employment rate among the more educated, rather the unemployment rate among the more educated is more than the less educated.
That is part of what Mr. Vyas has explained.
The position.
Yes. Yes, that is part of what Mr. Vyas has explained. Now, Ms. Chakrabarti, I want to get your perspective in a more experiential way about the numbers. We saw them, they're startling. That's why I had Mr. Vyas on first to explain his numbers. And they're truly worrying. Are you seeing this reflect in the kind of demand that is coming in from companies?
So I think CMI data has always been intriguing, and I'm intrigued by even the current set of statistics that have come up. However, I think what's important for me to share is that I cannot quite agree with the point of view that we can attribute this challenge of graduate unemployment or subsystem employment or underemployment to the fact that there is a slowdown. I think this is a worrying trend that has existed in the country over the past 2 decades. And this is something I can speak experientially. I personally believe that, I mean, if one were to refer to the National Occupation Code data, 90% of the kids who are coming out of our colleges and universities have knowledge or a graduate degree, but they do not have the skills. And 90% of the jobs that are getting created in India require skills and not knowledge. As long as this gap exists, and of course this gap is getting wider day by day, we would continue to see the kind of underemployment or unemployment. I mean, just to give you a number, 58% of the graduates who are employed earn less than about 8,000 rupees a month. So it's not just about unemployment, there is severe underemployment as well when we are talking about graduates. And honestly, colleges are not what it used to be. I mean, the Delhi University today has 100% as a cutoff for admissions, college admissions. 32% of the retail clerks in US have a college degree today. It used to be 1% in 1970s. 60% of the Korean cab drivers have a graduate degree. It used to be 4% in the 1970s. And even 20% of our security guards today have a graduate degree. So I think what I'm trying to say is that these graduates, there is a more acute skill issue that's going on in the country rather than just being an employment issue or the number of jobs out there. Our issue or our challenge as somebody who's trying to provide employment is that we have graduates and we have jobs, but these jobs are not matching the available pool. And that's happening on account of them being inadequate from the perspective of the kind of demand that employers today have. Until and unless we focus on this issue, and honestly, this is not an issue which has erupted just on account of the current.
Yeah, but what explains the spike? What explains the spike? I mean, there is a spike in the data. There is a spike in the data, and I actually had a chance to speak with Mr. Vyas about this earlier as well. And and I asked him exactly this question: is it that the graduates are not hireable? Is that the problem?
I do believe that. I do believe that.
But would that explain then a spike in the data and the number of graduates in this? Let me get Mr. Ghosh in on this. Mr. Ghosh, do you think it's more than a supply-demand mismatch? It is a quality mismatch that companies are looking for graduates or they are looking for skilled labor or skilled employees, but the skill doesn't exist or not to the extent that is required.
This is true because you know, the mismatch between demand for skills and the actual skills available, that is very stark. And you know, what is required really is to map the you know, the jobs of the future, and to have a partnership between government and the entrepreneurs, the corporate leaders and all that, to see that the jobs that are in demand or likely to be in demand in the near future are really attended to in the training institutes, in the you know, technology and other skills that are required. Because there is a big mismatch, and the ordinary graduate is not able to come to terms with the technology that is growing and evolving.
Chronic issues. These are chronic issues. Ritu, I want to understand, you know, companies will still have to hire people for key jobs and key functions, even if they're not getting, you know, the best of the crop. Are you saying today that the economic slowdown, and no one is denying there's an economic slowdown, has had zero impact on employment rates?
I guess, of course, there is some impact on the kind of demand that we would love to see, but we are also noticing it's very sectoral in nature, which means there are specific sectors which are more aggrieved than the other sectors. And of course, those telecom, for example, is a sector on strike when it comes to employment. We're seeing that trend in some pockets in automobiles, infrastructure. We're seeing that in gems and jewelry. And so there are these pockets which are emerging where definitely there is some kind of a slowdown that we visibly see. Some of the domestic consumption sectors continue to remain stable. However, the specific question that you're saying, that is there any impact? Of course, there will be some impact, but my bigger worry is, Tamanna, that if tomorrow the economy rebounds and there is buoyancy and there is positive sentiment and jobs come into the country, would our graduates will be better off? My worry is that given the current situation with the quality of graduates that the country is coming out with, my question is, why do we need so many graduates? We can actually skill our youth in specific vocations rather than bring them under this social pressure that everybody needs to be a graduate. I do understand there is a social signaling value of being a graduate in a country like India, but we have to look at alternate channels. We have to create employability per se in these graduates. Until and unless they're employable, even if we go create jobs, this particular challenge with the set of graduates that are coming out will continue to be there.
No, that's an important point, and actually part of a larger chronic issue, questioning the education system and how in touch it is really with the reality of what the marketplace needs. But a little doubt that it is something which will have to be addressed sooner or later. Can we really afford such a large mass of youth in India coming out year after year after spending monies to educate themselves, not finding jobs, which is a question to think about. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us on The First Debate.